Hello everyone, and welcome back to another True Crime Mysteries video. Thank you all for being here. Today we're discussing 3 more recently solved cold cases, but first I want to let you know that this video is sponsored by Future. More on that in a minute, but with that being said, let's get into it. Number 3. Maryanne Baggintos. It was on June 5, 1984 in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, when 25-year-old Maryanne Baggintos disappeared forever, leaving her son, her home, and her family to wonder what had happened to her. Maryanne had recently separated from her husband, Jerry Baggintos. The two had mostly concluded a lengthy custody battle over their only child together, and the last court date was to finalize child support payments for Maryanne, who had been awarded primary custody. Also in the separation, Maryanne stayed in the family home, while her estranged husband moved back in with his parents. To pay the bills, Maryanne also got a boarder. On the morning of her disappearance, the only person to see her that morning was Jerry, her estranged husband. He would later tell the detectives that he'd gone over to the house to take Maryanne to a car dealership to trade in her vehicle. However, he said that when he arrived, she wasn't ready to leave yet, so he took his son to a nearby park, where they played for a while. When they returned to the house, Jerry claimed that Maryanne had left a note on the counter stating that the car wouldn't start and she'd popped over to the corner store and would be right back. He claimed he waited for hours, but she never returned. It had been Maryanne's mother 2 days later who'd report her missing. Meanwhile, Jerry had moved back into the family home and kicked out the boarder who had been staying there. Maryanne's mother never believed Jerry's story. Maryanne had been in a car accident a few years before her disappearance, and it had left her with a permanent limp, which she treated with a lift in her shoe, but walking was so uncomfortable for her, and her mother doubts she would ever have popped over anywhere on foot. When detectives first interviewed Jerry at the property, they noted an area of the garage that had freshly dug dirt, with cardboard over top in an attempt to conceal it. When probed, Jerry gave conflicting statements about why he had dug a hole in his garage. The dug area was about 6 feet by 3 feet. Days later, they came back with a search warrant to excavate the hole, but it had again looked different than when the officer had first seen it. They dug 5 feet down, but there was no sign of anything. The search warrant was also exercised within the home, and the note that Jerry had claimed had gotten thrown away was found in the living room. The note, however, didn't say what Jerry had originally stated. The crumpled piece of paper stated, quote, "Had to run a quick errand, be right back." No mention of the car not starting or the corner store. When detectives canvassed the neighborhood, no one could recall seeing Maryanne that day. But when detectives tried to confirm Jerry's story, they discovered that he'd called into work that morning, and when he returned the following day, his co-workers noted he had bandages on his arm. Jerry had given conflicting statements about what he'd been doing that day, and no one was able to confirm his whereabouts for the day his wife had gone missing. Jerry never seemed overly concerned about where Maryanne had gone. He'd always told people that she had run away to start a new life, and would tell people often that he'd got postcards and calls from her, but Maryanne's family have stated that they've never heard or seen Maryanne since the day she disappeared, also noting none of her belongings were packed and her bank account was never touched after she disappeared. Plus, the biggest flaw in Jerry's argument was that Maryanne loved her son and would never, ever leave him behind. Without ever finding a body, detectives didn't have enough evidence to arrest Jerry Baggintos, so he was allowed to move on, live his life, get remarried, and concrete over his garage. In 2018, Maryanne's cold case would be reopened, with detectives going through all the original evidence in the case. The smoking gun would eventually be the note, according to Jerry, that had been written by Maryanne. Another search warrant was issued for Jerry's home on September 2022. He had never moved from the home his first wife had disappeared from. Law enforcement would collect multiple items from the home, and some of those were handwriting samples from Jerry. The samples were examined and ultimately determined to be a match to that note. Jerry had written the note, not Maryanne. also searched with the backyard of the home as well as the garage area. Detectives now believe that Jerry Baggintos murdered his wife and originally hid her body in the garage, but when detectives had poked around and asked about the freshly dug dirt, he had dug her body back up and relocated her to somewhere else. However, detectives weren't able to find her remains on the property. On December 15, 2022, Jerry Baggintos was arrested. Now 67 years old, he was charged with 1 count of criminal homicide for the murder of Maryanne.
The arrest of Jerry Baggintos reflects decades of hard work and dedication by law enforcement personnel beginning in 1984 with members of the Peckway Township Police Department and continuing with numerous criminal investigators in the Pennsylvania State Police leading up to the present day.
Baggintos is being held in custody while he awaits trial. He has so far pleaded not guilty. A trial date has not been set yet, but the family of Maryanne look forward to seeing Jerry Baggintos in court and hopefully receiving justice for Maryanne, even after 4 decades. Number 2. Rita Curran. It was the summer of 1971 when 24-year-old Rita Curran moved into a shared home in Burlington, Vermont. Rita was a school teacher, but that summer she was going to be working on her graduate degree and working as a housekeeper at a nearby motel. On July 19th, Rita returned home after rehearsal with her a cappella singing group around 10 p.m. At the time when Rita went to bed, her roommates had all been home, but they had all left together to go get drinks at a nearby bar, leaving Rita alone. Hours later, the roommates returned home and made a horrible discovery. Bloody handprints were seen on the kitchen door, and then they found Rita's body in their room. They checked her body for a pulse, but immediately knew it was too late. She was cold to the touch. Rita had been viciously attacked. She was covered in defensive injuries, indicating that she had fought for her life, but was ultimately overpowered. An autopsy determined she'd been strangled to death. The killer had also sexually assaulted her. The crime scene was bloody and noted as particularly violent. Rita was covered in bruises. Her clothing, a robe, and nightgown had been torn in half. Several key pieces of evidence were found at the scene, which included a cigarette butt, a hair found in Rita's hand, and blood evidence that had likely come from the killer. Initially, detectives presumed it might have been a robbery gone wrong. They hypothesized that someone had been casing the house, saw the 3 roommates leave, and took that opportunity to rob the home, but discovered Rita was still there. But that was quickly ruled out when they discovered Rita's purse still had cash in it, as well as her car keys, and her car were found undisturbed. Next, the detectives went about to establish how the killer had gotten into the apartment. There had been no signs of forced entry or anything to indicate which door the killer had come in. The blood evidence on the back door indicated which door the killer had gone out of. They interviewed the roommates and asked about their door locking habits, and they revealed they only had 1 key that they all shared. When they had left Rita to go to the bar that night, they had left both the front and back door unlocked. The roommates were all cleared as suspects, as well as their boyfriends. Neighbors were also interviewed, which included a newly married couple that rented the apartment 2 floors above the girls. According to them, they didn't hear anything, and they both were each other's alibi, so they were ruled out as well. The investigation had gone on for months, with hundreds of hours dedicated to solving Rita's murder, but ultimately there wasn't enough evidence to get a solid suspect. Unfortunately, during that time, there had been a string of violent attacks on women. None appeared connected to Rita's case. In 1984, following the arrest of well-known serial killer Ted Bundy, Burlington PD established a theory that Rita may have been one of his early victims. They thought there might have been a connection because the motel Rita worked at was close to where Bundy had been born. Bundy was asked several times if he'd killed Rita Curran, and he denied it until his execution in 1989. Later, his DNA was tested against the DNA found at the crime scene, and Bundy was ultimately ruled out as a suspect. Throughout the years, the case was reopened multiple times. Rita's parents passed, never knowing what happened to their daughter, though her siblings would continue to search for justice. In 2014, evidence in the case was retested. They got a solid DNA profile from the cigarette butt found at the crime scene. It was entered into CODIS, but never led to an identification. In 2021, 50 years had passed since Rita's murder. It grew to be the oldest case in Burlington PD history. It was then that the evidence was again re-examined with new forensic techniques, and they got more DNA evidence from the housecoat, nightgown, and linoleum in the bedroom, which ultimately was tied back to the same DNA found on the cigarette. After 5 decades, many of the original suspects were long gone, but detectives reached out to one of the neighbors one more time, the wife of the couple who lived 2 floors above Rita, but this time her story had changed since 1971. When re-interviewed, she said that her husband at the time, William DeRoos, had instructed her to say that he'd been with her all night. She said at the time she hadn't been concerned. Her husband had said his criminal history would make him an automatic suspect, and she felt that that made sense and lied to the police. In actuality, her lie had given her sleepless nights because he hadn't been with her. She revealed that evening they had their first big fight since their marriage, and he had, quote, gone for a walk to let off steam, and come back sometime after midnight, giving her husband about an hour and a half of time completely unaccounted for. She revealed that after Rita's death, her marriage with William had quickly spiraled downwards. They would eventually divorce, and the two parted ways. As far as she knew, it had been William's plan to move to Thailand to become a Buddhist monk. Detectives began to piece together William DeRoos's life after he moved from Vermont. They found that he'd gotten remarried in San Francisco in 1974, and that marriage was also quickly absolved when his second wife learned of his violent tendencies. When asked about her marriage, she told detectives she witnessed him stabbing a friend in the abdomen completely out of the blue, and she had quickly left him when they were having dinner one night and he started to strangle her suddenly without any provocation. It was that incident that made her pack her bags and flee the marriage. William DeRoos died in 1983 of a drug overdose alone in a motel in San Francisco. DNA evidence confirmed that DeRoos had murdered Rita Curran. During a press conference, C.C. Moore, the head geologist at Parabon Nanolabs, said, quote, even though he's dead and there won't be justice, it is really a positive outcome. Rita's siblings are grateful to have answers as to who killed their sister. They thanked Burlington PD for their years of hard work to close the investigation.
Just a few days ago, we filled this room with about 60 detectives, Burlington Police Department staff, and my family. We had a nice lunch and shared stories. We thanked everyone in the Burlington Police Department for all they did to solve my sister's case. I thanked them again this morning. Rita went to Mount St. Mary's Academy in Burlington. She lived at home while attending Trinity College. It was a good home with the 3 of us kids, our parents, and our grandfather. Rita and I lived at home until each of us was 24 years old. The difference was the 2 weeks after Rita moved out, her life was cut short. Amongst all the pictures of Rita on the internet, the 2 most often shown are one taken from her driver's license and one from her yearbook. What's not shown is a little poem by E.B. Browning that she chose to be next to her yearbook picture. Little did she know that that poem would soon appear on her gravestone. Her headstone reads, our daughter Rita. I seek no copy now of all life's first half. Leave here the pages with long missing curls and write me new my future's epigraph. New angel mine, unhoped for in the future. Unhoped for in the world, I'm sorry. Life in those days was very different. My parents didn't have social workers and specialized grievance counselors. They had the confessional and the rosary beads. My mother came here from Ireland, and my father from Newfoundland. We were an old-fashioned, strong Catholic family. I don't think so much about the guy who did this as I do about Rita and my parents, what they went through. I pray to my parents, and I pray to Rita. My wife, Nancy, tells me we will get through this. We are Curran strong.
Number 1. Amanda Gonzalez. It had been around Halloween in 2001 when 19-year-old Amanda Gonzalez called her mother, Gloria Bates, while deployed at a military base in Germany. During that call, Amanda revealed that she was 4 months pregnant. It had been a surprise, but welcomed, and Amanda and her mother talked at length. After the call, Gloria booked plane tickets for her daughter to come home for Christmas. Amanda was on her first deployment, and she was enjoying Germany, but her first year in the military was proving a little bit of a challenge. The work itself was fine. She was a private and worked as a cook on the base. Amanda had always wanted to help people. She'd always been a bright student in school and had dreams of becoming a physiotherapist for children, and it had shocked her family when she came home and enlisted in the military. She had planned to serve her time and use her GI Bill to cover her schooling to be a physiotherapist. The military also gave her the opportunity to travel the world, and when the chance came to go to Europe came up, Amanda signed up. She did disclose to her mom that she was experiencing bullying from other military personnel, but she believed it wasn't anything she couldn't handle. Amanda had always been independent and was known to hold her own. In the military, her nickname had been Firecracker. However, Amanda never made it back to Texas for Christmas. On November 5th, Amanda failed to report to work. She was found in the third-floor barracks. Her cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation, and experts determined her time of death was likely 2 days before she'd been found. Now, many details of Amanda's murder investigation are not public, since the investigation was being handled by both the FBI and the military. We don't know what evidence was collected or how many suspects were developed. For the next 2 decades, Gloria Bates advocated for her daughter. She wrote to members of Congress and various TV shows like Dr. Phil and America's Most Wanted, anything to bring media attention, making sure Amanda's murder wasn't swept under the rug. When Vanessa Guilin was murdered in Fort Hood by a fellow soldier, it brought up waves of emotion for Gloria, who couldn't help but notice similarities to Amanda's murder. Then, after 21 years, Gloria received a call from the FBI. They'd made an arrest. Shannon L. Wilkerson, now 42, was arrested in Florida for the murder of Private Amanda Gonzalez. At the time of the murder, Wilkerson was a member of the armed forces, but soon after was discharged from the military. Wilkerson was charged under the Military Extraterritorial Jurisdiction Act with 1 count of first-degree murder. He faces a sentence of life in prison and has so far pleaded not guilty. I'm not sure if we'll hear more about this case when it goes to trial, but if you want me to keep an eye on this case, let me know in the comments below. Well, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. As always, if you want to support the channel, the easiest way is to hit the like button. You can also subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss my next upload. Other ways to support the channel by joining my Patreon or channel membership. I also have merch available, and you will find all the links in the description box, plus a few extras. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter for more. But with that being said, thank you so much for being here and supporting what I do. It is very appreciated. But that's it for me. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.